Kirsten Stewart and Joe Alwyn, the young British actor who gives an extraordinary performance as the young Billy Lynn in his first ever film role. I spoke to Joe and the novelist Ben Fountain, who wrote the novel that Billy Lynn's Long Half-Time Walk, on which the film is based.
The initial idea came Thanksgiving 2004. George W. Bush had just been elected. Given the state of the country, the state of the war, I was just very confused and bewildered how the country could have endorsed the course of action up to that point, and I realized I didn't understand anything about my country. So I was profoundly depressed and confused, and Thanksgiving came around, and the Dallas Cowboys always play. So we had a crowd over at the house, as we always do, and the game was on in the background, and halftime comes on, and everyone else wanders off. I start looking at it, truly looking at it, and it's one of the most surreal, insane things I've ever seen. And it's very much the way Ang depicts it in the movie and the way I depict it in the book, this extravaganza of patriotism and pop culture, softcore porn, flags everywhere, very militaristic, like hundreds of soldiers down on the field, all being used as props. All these things that shouldn't go together, don't go together, but do get mashed up together in America. I thought there's a story there. That's my country.
Now, Joe, you play the lead, Billy Lynn, who is one of these young soldiers who's being paraded around at half-time. He says, I'm being celebrated for the worst day of my life, because he was caught on YouTube saving one of his comrades who then dies in his arms. It's a very traumatic event.
Yeah, it's the complete disconnect and contrast between the reality of what he's gone through and what these boys have gone through and seen, and then the way they're treated back home, and that they're just used.
Yes, but I mean, everybody wants to package up Billy and his comrades and monetize their trauma in some ways, because we see the owner of the Dallas Cowboys football team using the young soldiers to glorify the ideal of military heroism and war. How common is this kind of commoditizing in contemporary America?
It's the air you breathe. Everyone supports the troops. Who wouldn't support the troops? They are in harm's way. They're very young for the most part. If you don't support the war, you don't support the troops, and, well, then you're a terrible person.
Although you manage in this book to be anti-war, but pro-soldier.
Of course we thank the soldiers for their service. How deep those thanks can go, how meaningful they can be when we have no clear conception of the war and aren't even trying for a clear conception of that reality, it's got to ring false to, so many of these soldiers.
Joe, you were still at drama school in London when you went for the role of Billy Lynn. What made you go for the role?
I just signed with my agent. I was still at school at the time, and she sent me these sides, and I remember thinking, it's an Ang Lee film. Wow. I mean, I wasn't expecting anything to come of it, but I did a couple of scenes, and we sent them to the casting director, and we got a call that night at midnight saying Ang wants to meet him in a couple of days. We're going to bring him to New York. And so I dropped out of school and went to New York that weekend, and I met with Ang, and I thought it had gone well, but didn't expect anything more to come of it.
As Ang says, it was love at first sight.
It was love at first sight.
On Ang's part. He saw Joe, he heard him speak for about a minute, and he thought, that's the guy.
And we should say that this has been shot in a very unusual way, using 120 frames per second as well as 3D, so very, very high definition.
Yeah.
And he tried you out in front of these new cameras, didn't he?
Yeah. I knew it was going to be very clear and very detailed, and so in the tests I recognised, especially when we started filming, how close it was going to be to Billy and how personal it was going to be and how much thoughts were going to have to register in the eyes and really be felt, because he often wasn't going to speak, he often wasn't going to say what he was feeling.
Because I think Ang Lee said the camera is so high definition it can pick up the slightest rise in body temperature.
Yeah.
So if you've got a slight blush on your skin, it's all there.
Yeah, I think the very first day we were filming, it's meant to be a cold day and he's coming home for Thanksgiving, and we were filming in Georgia and it was boiling hot, and so I was boiling hot, and so we couldn't use the shots. He said he could see the complexion just wasn't right. And also it meant we couldn't use any makeup in the film because it picked up all conventional makeup, and so everything was stripped back. And because of that, what you see is real.
How is Ang directing you? Presumably this is very subtle acting. I'm guessing that at drama school you've been doing a lot of stage work, projecting.
Yeah.
Now you're doing the opposite.
I had no reference of what being on a set was normally like or what making a film is like. So in one sense,
you've never been in front of a camera before.
No. So I was stepping into something, and whilst I could tell it was unusual, it was all that I knew. there was this huge camera that your face was inside the matte box. You weren't able to look at the other actors often. You were just moving from a piece of tape on one side to a piece of tape on the other side. And within that few centimetre span, had to go from one emotion to another.
In the space of 2 weeks, you go from being a struggling drama student to suddenly in this huge circus, this major, big-budget Hollywood movie. Presumably you were kind of thinking, God, this is surreal, just like Billy Lynn's thinking, this is surreal.
Yeah, completely. In many ways, he's very far away from me. He's an all-American Texas boy. He's a soldier. He's 19. I was older than he was. I'm British. But at the same time, of course, there was a parallel of me being taken from my life as I knew it in London and thrown into this world and this environment and this country that I'd never been in before, a set which I'd never been on, people that I'd grown up watching their films, and I could try and use bits of that to fit into what Billy was going through.
Ben, there's a character, a very wealthy businessman called Norm, who owns the football team. He bears a very strong resemblance to Donald Trump. Do they have a lot in common?
They have no compunction about their own self-interest. Self-interest is easily conflated with the greater good. This is the American way. You see a way to boost your net worth and yourself, well, then of course you do it. And if other people are paying the cost, well, that's easy to rationalize. You can always say, well, they'll benefit too. The things I was worried about and thinking about in 2004, they've only become more pronounced in American life.
Ben Fountain and Joe Alwyn. And Billy Lynn's long halftime walk is released on Friday, Certificate 15, and it's well worth seeing.